Most people approach relationships thinking that if they just care enough, if they just try harder, they can reach the other person. And in most cases, that's true. But when it comes to avoidance, it's an entirely different game. You see, avoidants aren't just distant or disinterested. They operate from a deeply ingrained survival mechanism that governs how they experience connection. They have built invisible walls around themselves, walls so subtle that most people don't even notice them until they've walked straight into them and walked away bruised and confused. These walls aren't designed to hurt anyone. They are designed to protect. And here's the truth. Ordinary empathy, ordinary love, ordinary patience will never break them down. You need something far deeper. You need the awareness and sensitivity of a super empath. Avoidants are often misjudged as cold or unfeeling, but that's a misunderstanding. They feel profoundly, but they've learned that expressing emotion openly is dangerous. Vulnerability is risky to them because it has historically triggered pain, rejection, or abandonment. They anticipate being engulfed or losing control, so they retreat before anyone can get too close. And it's not just occasional retreat, it's an instinctive, automatic response. Their nervous system is wired to protect itself even when it seems irrational to the outside world. What looks like disinterest is often a dance between desire and fear, a push and pull they can't entirely control. Now, consider the implications for anyone trying to connect with them. If you approach them with conventional love strategies, compliments, gifts, promises, you are in essence hitting the wrong target. Avoidants don't respond to ordinary gestures the way most people do because their emotional radar is tuned to distance, autonomy, and self-preservation. They don't just avoid conflict, they avoid intimacy itself. And the more you try to force it, the more they retreat. Ordinary empathy might feel compassionate, but it can be misinterpreted as pressure, as a threat to their independence. This is why understanding them is not just helpful, it's essential. You must learn to read the subtleties, the pauses in conversation, the slight hesitation before they commit, the unconscious ways they deflect vulnerability. It's in these micro moments that their real patterns are revealed. And this is where a super empath shines. You don't just see the words, you feel the undercurrent of emotion they are trying to hide. You detect the tension before it erupts, the need for space before it becomes distance, and the quiet cry for understanding beneath the armor. This level of perception is rare, but it's the only way to navigate their world effectively. Understanding the avoidant mindset is also about humility. You must accept that you cannot change them. You cannot push through their defenses with reasoning or logic alone. Instead, you must recognize the rhythm of their fear and respect it, even as you maintain your own integrity and emotional center. You honor their autonomy while quietly becoming the safe presence that can eventually lead them toward trust. Ordinary love is reactive. Extraordinary empathy is proactive. It anticipates, it adapts, and it creates a space where avoidance can gradually transform into connection. So the first step, the absolutely crucial step, is understanding. Not judging, not fixing, not convincing, but deeply, profoundly understanding. You see the patterns, you feel the subtle shifts, and you recognize that this is not about winning them over. It's about creating the conditions where they can safely meet you halfway. Without this insight, nothing else you do will work. And here's the takeaway I want you to remember. Avoidants aren't broken, and you are not here to fix them. You are here to understand them so deeply, so intelligently that your presence becomes the bridge across the chasm they have built around themselves. Only when you see them clearly can real connection begin. Once you truly understand the avoidant mindset, you realize something profound. Not everyone is equipped to navigate it. Most people try and most fail, not because they lack care, but because they lack perception. This is where the concept of a super empath comes in. And I want you to listen closely because this is where ordinary empathy meets its limits. A super empath doesn't just feel what another person is feeling in the obvious moments. The laughter, the tears, the visible signs of emotion. No. A super empath senses the currents beneath the surface, the subtle fluctuations that most people miss entirely. They feel the hesitation behind the words, the tension in the pauses, the unspoken anxieties tucked behind a smile. They feel what others cannot articulate, often what even the avoidant themselves cannot articulate. Avoidants are masters at hiding, at deflecting, at appearing calm when inside they are a storm of fear, indecision, and doubt. Their withdrawal is calculated but also instinctive, and it is often imperceptible to anyone who isn't finely tuned to it. Ordinary empathy will respond to what is visible. They said they are fine, so they must be fine. But a super empath knows that what is unsaid often carries more truth than what is spoken. They sense the subtle contradictions, the excitement laced with fear, the longing masked by pride, the affection that retreats when touched too closely. This is a rare gift, but it's not mystical. It is the product of refined awareness, of deep listening, and of a practiced ability to inhabit the emotional world of another without losing oneself. And here's the thing, this perception is not passive, it's active. Super empaths do not simply absorb emotions. They interpret them, they anticipate reactions, they map out the emotional architecture of a person who is constantly building walls and then dismantling them. They recognize patterns that others overlook. They know that a slight change in tone, a fleeting glance, or a hesitation in decision-making can reveal far more about an avoidant's needs than any direct statement ever could. And because they see it, they can respond in ways that are measured, intentional, and profoundly effective. Think about this. Avoidants are constantly scanning for threats. Every ordinary attempt to connect or push intimacy forward can be perceived as a threat, and so they recoil. But a super empath can sense the boundaries before they are crossed. They feel the discomfort before it escalates. They intuitively know when to advance, when to step back, and when simply to hold space and be present. This is the paradoxical power of a super empath. They are both deeply attuned and completely grounded. They create safety not through words or promises alone, but through their presence, their awareness, and their unwavering ability to remain connected without being consumed. This level of perception also changes the dynamic entirely. Avoidants, who are so accustomed to triggering fear or resistance in others, encounter a new reality, someone who can see them, understand them, and still remain steady. They cannot manipulate, intimidate, or withdraw in ways that are effective because the super empath does not react in the predictable ways the avoidant expects. And over time, this creates a shift. What was once an automatic defense begins to soften because the avoidant realizes that connection no longer carries the risk it once did. So the super empath's perception is not just a skill, it is a strategic advantage. It allows them to navigate the invisible terrain of avoidance, to meet fear with understanding, and to create space where true intimacy can emerge. But make no mistake, this is not an easy path. It requires patience, discipline, and above all, the courage to engage with emotions that are not easily accessible. And here's what I want you to take with you. Understanding is the doorway, but perception is the key. A super empath sees what others cannot see. They feel what others cannot feel. And in that seeing, in that feeling, lies the power to transform avoidance into connection. When you cultivate this depth of perception, you don't just respond to the avoidant, you change the very nature of the interaction, and that is where true breakthroughs happen. Now, understanding. The avoidant mindset and sensing their hidden currents are critical, but there's a third component that separates those who simply try from those who truly succeed in breaking the avoidance cycle: emotional containment. And this is where most people stumble. You see, when an avoidant senses pressure, they pull back. When they feel someone's anxiety or fear, they recoil. And most of us, when faced with withdrawal, react instinctively. We chase, we plead, we argue, we try harder. But this is exactly what fuels the very cycle we're trying to break. Ordinary empathy reacts. Super empathy contains. Emotional containment is the art of remaining steady even when everything inside you wants to react. It's the capacity to feel the intensity of the other person's emotional storm without being swept away. Imagine standing in the eye of a hurricane while everything around you is chaos. That's what it takes to engage with avoidance successfully. They are masters at triggering reactions, subtle comments, late responses, contradictions, moments of withdrawal designed to create uncertainty. And if you respond the way most people do, the storm grows. But if you contain your own emotional energy, you do something remarkable. You create a safe harbor. Non-reactivity is not passive. It's active mastery. It requires awareness of your own triggers, discipline over your impulses, and a deep understanding that your emotional state can either escalate or defuse the situation. When you can maintain calmness in the face of their unpredictability, you become the paradoxical anchor they didn't have and know they were searching for. Avoidants may resist closeness, but they cannot ignore stability, especially when it is combined with understanding. They are drawn not by words, but by the energy you carry, the steady, unshakable presence that says, I see you, I understand you, and I will not be destabilized by your defense mechanisms. This level of emotional mastery requires introspection. You must know yourself deeply enough to recognize when your own fear, neediness, or desire for control is creeping into the interaction. Super empaths are not immune to these impulses. They experience them fully, but they have trained themselves to pause, observe, and choose their response rather than react automatically. This is crucial because every reaction feeds into the avoidance pattern. Every chase reinforces their belief that closeness equals loss of control. Every withdrawal reinforces your fear and perpetuates the cycle. Containment interrupts that loop. And here's the philosophical truth. Containment is both compassion and strategy. You are compassionate because you can hold space for another person's discomfort without judgment. You are strategic because by not reacting, you teach the avoidant a new language, one of trust, patience, and consistent emotional safety. Over time, they begin to realize that closeness no longer triggers chaos, that intimacy can exist without suffocation. The walls they built so long ago start to feel less necessary because the energy around them is no longer threatening. Emotional containment is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending everything is perfect. It is about mastering the dance of energy, being fully present, fully aware, fully human, without allowing the fluctuations of another's fear to dictate your own stability. It's a superhuman skill, but it is precisely what makes super empaths uniquely capable of breaking the avoidance cycle. So here's what I want you to remember. When avoidance triggers your instinct to react, pause, breathe, center yourself, contain the energy. In that moment, you are no longer a participant in the cycle, you are its interrupter. You are creating a space where connection is possible, where fear can transform into trust, where avoidance meets the steady, compassionate presence that can finally soften it. Emotional containment is not just a tool, it is the bridge from fear to connection, and only those who master it can truly break the cycle. By the time you've developed an understanding of the avoidant mindset, honed your perception as a super empath, and mastered emotional containment, you reach a critical crossroads, boundaries. And let me be clear, boundaries are not just a nice to have. They are the backbone of any meaningful interaction with an avoidant. Most people think boundaries are walls, rules, or ultimatums that push people away. That's a misunderstanding. Boundaries, when wielded by a super empath, are actually bridges. They define your space, your integrity, your needs, while still allowing others to feel safe, seen, and connected. Here's the challenge. Avoidants test boundaries constantly, often unconsciously. They will retreat, they will push, they will try subtle manipulations, not out of malice, but because that's how their nervous system regulates closeness. And many people fail here because they confuse connection with compliance. They believe that if they set a firm boundary, they will be rejected or abandoned. But the truth is, avoidants respect clarity and strength, even if they initially resist it. They may fear it, but they cannot ignore it. This is the paradox. Connection with an avoidant is not about bending, it's about standing firm with empathy and still remaining present. Setting unshakable boundaries is an act of courage, but also an act of strategy. You are saying, in effect, I see you, I respect you, and I will not sacrifice my own needs to accommodate fear or avoidance. And here's the key. Your boundaries must be non-negotiable, but delivered with compassion. You do not punish. You do not withdraw in anger. You communicate clearly, calmly, and consistently what is acceptable and what is not. And because you are grounded, the avoidant begins to sense that this is not a trap, not a threat, not another force trying to control them. Instead, it is an invitation to engage on a new level, one that is safe, predictable, and reliable. Boundaries are also about consistency over time. Avoidants are highly sensitive to inconsistency. They can detect even the smallest deviation in tone, intention, or energy. Super empaths know that the effectiveness of a boundary is not in a single declaration, but in its repeated, unwavering enforcement. If you set a boundary once and break it the next day, the avoidant interprets that as weakness and the cycle continues. But when boundaries are maintained, the avoidant learns slowly but surely that your presence does not threaten them and that your connection comes. with integrity, stability, and respect. This is where connection and boundaries coexist. Many people believe that to set boundaries is to create distance. The opposite is true. When you establish your limits while remaining emotionally available and attuned, you paradoxically increase intimacy. The avoidant experiences safety, not suffocation, and over time they begin to relax into the relationship in a way they could never do with someone reactive or inconsistent. The super empath understands that the power of boundaries lies not in rigidity, but in the combination of clarity, empathy, and presence. Philosophically, boundaries are a declaration of self-respect, and in that respect, they are transformative. You are no longer playing a reactive game of chase and retreat. You are leading the dance with clarity and dignity. You are teaching the avoidant that connection does not mean losing oneself, that intimacy does not have to equal fear, and that love can coexist with integrity. So here's what I want you to remember. Boundaries are not barriers. They are the architecture of connection. Set them clearly, hold them consistently, deliver them with empathy, and watch how the avoidant begins to step into a new paradigm, one where closeness is possible, safe, and sustainable. The stronger your boundaries, the stronger your connection becomes. Stand firm, remain compassionate, and understand this: boundaries are not a threat to connection. They are its most powerful foundation. By now you understand that avoidants operate from fear, that super empaths sense the currents others cannot, that emotional containment keeps the storm from escalating, and that boundaries create the safe framework necessary for connection. But there's a deeper, almost alchemical step that separates ordinary interactions from true transformation, transforming fear into connection. This is the point where the magic happens, the point where avoidance begins to dissolve, not through persuasion, but through the energy you bring into the relationship. Avoidants are not avoidant because they don't want closeness. They are avoidant because closeness triggers fear. Fear of being engulfed, fear of losing independence, fear of rejection or exposure. They have learned that intimacy is dangerous, and so they pull back, they hedge, they retreat. Most people respond to this fear with frustration, with more pursuit, with more attempts to prove love, but all that does is validate the avoidance perception. Closeness equals risk. Super empaths take a radically different approach. They do not seek to eliminate fear. They work with it, channel it, and ultimately transform it into safety, trust, and connection. This begins with presence. When an avoidant is fearful, the first instinct for most is to fix, to explain, to reassure. But reassurance alone is insufficient. It can feel like pressure, like an attempt to control. Instead, a super empath embodies steadiness. They hold space for the fear without judgment, without reaction. They acknowledge it internally and externally, creating an atmosphere where fear is seen and respected rather than resisted. In doing so, the avoidant experiences a paradox. They are exposed, yet not threatened. Their nervous system begins to register something new: that intimacy can exist without danger, that closeness can coexist with autonomy. Validation is the next key. Super empaths do not lecture, debate, or argue about the avoidance fear. They recognize it, mirror it, and respond in a way that affirms the experience without feeding the anxiety. I see your hesitation. I understand why you feel this way, and I am here. These words, or more importantly, the energy behind them, tell the avoidant that fear no longer needs to dictate behavior. It is not about permission, it is about presence. Fear becomes a signal rather than a barrier, a guide rather than a wall. Vulnerability plays a critical role in this transformation. Avoidants are hypersensitive to perceived weakness in others, but they are also drawn to courage disguised as vulnerability. Super empaths show openness not in ways that overwhelm, but in ways that invite reciprocity. They model trust and consistency, revealing themselves carefully, and in doing so, they communicate that connection is a shared journey, not a threat or a trap. The avoidant begins to see that intimacy can be negotiated, that it is not synonymous with loss of self. Philosophically, this is the essence of transformation, turning what has been the greatest obstacle into the bridge itself. Fear, which once repelled, becomes the very element that guides the relationship into deeper understanding. When handled with awareness, patience, and emotional intelligence, fear stops being a wall and becomes a doorway. The avoidant learns that connection does not demand surrender. It demands courage, presence, and consistent demonstration that closeness can be safe. So here's what I want you to hold on to. Transforming fear into connection is not about changing the avoidant. It's about embodying the energy that makes change inevitable. Your steadiness, your presence, your validation, and your measured vulnerability create the conditions for fear to soften, for walls to lower, and for trust to emerge. When fear is met with understanding rather than reaction, it becomes the vehicle through which connection flows. And remember this, fear is not the enemy, it is the bridge. When you step onto that bridge as a super empath, you turn avoidance into intimacy, uncertainty into trust, and resistance into lasting connection. The moment you truly master this, the cycle of avoidance begins to break, not because of persuasion, but because of presence, insight, and airing emotional integrity. By now you understand the avoidant mindset, the super empath's perception, emotional containment, unshakable boundaries, and the transformation of fear into connection. And yet, if there's one truth that cannot be overstated, it's this: breaking the avoidance cycle is never instantaneous. There is no shortcut, no quick fix, no single conversation that suddenly rewires their patterns. It is a long game, and it is in the mastery of this long game that only super empaths truly succeed. Patience is the cornerstone. Avoidants are not slow by accident. They are slow because their nervous systems are calibrated to protect them from perceived threats. Every advance, every gesture, every attempt at intimacy is filtered through layers of fear and conditioning. A super empath recognizes this and resists the urge to rush, to explain, or to fix. They understand that transformation unfolds in small increments, often invisible to the casual observer. Patience here is not passive waiting. It is active, disciplined, and intentional presence. It is the steady energy that communicates, I am here unwavering, no matter how long it takes for you to meet me halfway. Persistence works hand in hand with patience. Avoidance will retreat, sometimes repeatedly. They will test your boundaries, your stability, your commitment. Ordinary individuals respond to these retreats with frustration or fear, which perpetuates the cycle. Super empaths respond differently. They persist, not through force, but through consistent demonstration of reliability, empathy, and integrity. Every action, every pause, every response is calibrated to reinforce trust rather than provoke resistance. This persistence is subtle yet powerful. It reassures the avoidant that connection is possible and that it does not require abandoning their autonomy. Emotional strategy is the final decisive element. Super empaths do not engage randomly, they engage intentionally. They read the patterns, anticipate the reactions, and adjust their energy accordingly. They know when to speak and when to listen, when to advance and when to pause, when to mirror and when to model. Every choice is made with awareness of both the immediate impact and the long-term trajectory of the relationship. It is strategy not as manipulation, but as the disciplined orchestration of energy, presence, and timing. The avoidant does not see the strategy, they feel it. And over time, the subtle, consistent influence shifts the dynamic, creating a new reality where trust, intimacy, and safety can coexist. The long game also demands resilience. You will face moments of doubt, moments where it feels like progress has stalled, moments where the avoidant retreats further than before. This is not failure. It is part of the process. Super empaths know that every setback carries information, every withdrawal reveals patterns, every resistance offers insight into the avoidant's inner world. Resilience here is not stubbornness, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that transformation is gradual, that mastery of the self is prerequisite to influencing another, and that emotional integrity cannot be sacrificed for short-term comfort. Philosophically, the long game teaches a profound truth. Real connection is not the result of force. It is the result of consistent, intelligent, and emotionally aware engagement over time. Avoidants do not respond to intensity, they respond to presence. They do not respond to pressure, they respond to patience. They do not respond to fear, they respond to trust. The super empath embodies all three, consistently and strategically, until the avoidant begins to experience connection in a way that feels safe, sustainable, and ultimately transformative. So here's the final takeaway I want you to hold. Mastery of the long game is the ultimate superpower. It is patience that does not waver, persistence that does not tire, and strategy that does not manipulate. It is the understanding that true intimacy is a marathon, not a sprint. When you embrace this, you not only break the avoidance cycle, you redefine what is possible in human connection, and in that redefinition lies the ultimate gift, the ability to turn fear into trust, avoidance into intimacy, and resistance into love that endures. So as we bring this journey to a close, I want you to pause and really take in what we've explored. We've uncovered the world of the avoidant, how fear shapes their behaviors, how subtle patterns govern their interactions, and why ordinary empathy alone can never bridge the gap. We've seen the power of the super empath, whose unique perception allows them to feel what others cannot, to read the currents beneath the surface, and to respond with wisdom and presence. We've explored emotional containment, the art of holding steady in the face of chaos, and setting unshakable boundaries without losing connection. We've seen how fear, when met with understanding rather than reaction, can be transformed into trust, safety, and intimacy. And we've acknowledged the long game, the patience, persistence, and strategy required to navigate the deep, often hidden patterns of avoidance over time. But here's the essence I want you to remember. This is not about changing someone else. It is not about forcing connection or winning a battle or trying to fix what they perceive as broken. It's about mastering yourself. It's about cultivating awareness, presence, empathy, and resilience so profound that your very energy becomes the bridge across their walls. When you embody clarity, stability, and unwavering emotional integrity, you do something extraordinary. You invite change, not through force, but through example. You create the conditions where avoidance meets understanding, resistance meets patience, and fear meets connection. This is the gift and the responsibility of the super empath, to navigate the unseen currents of emotion with insight, courage, and compassion, to turn what others see as barriers into pathways and what others experience as fear into trust, to play the long game with steadfastness and vision, knowing that true intimacy is built not in a moment, but over time with consistency, understanding, and heart. And so as you step away from this message, I want you to leave with this truth. The power to break the avoidance cycle lies within you, not in convincing, not in chasing, not in reacting, but in your capacity to see deeply, hold steady, set boundaries, transform fear, and persist with unwavering clarity. Only super empaths can do this. Only those willing to embody these qualities can create the transformation that seems impossible at first, but becomes inevitable through presence, patience, and emotional mastery. Remember, connection is not about control. It is about understanding. It is not about pressure. It is about patience. And it is not about reaction. It is about presence. Step into that role, hold that space, and watch as walls fall, fear softens, and real intimacy emerges. Because you, and only you with the power of super empathy, have the capacity to make it possible.